We are MythVision. Welcome back to MythVision Podcast. Your host, Derek Lambert. Ladies and gentlemen, right now up front, I need you to stop what you're doing. Of course, we're going to talk about the death of Joseph Smith, but you can't initiate yourself into this story without going and joining the Patreon of my good friends here. Bryce Blankenagle has a Patreon right now. He needs your help. Okay, he needs your help to make sure he can keep doing what he's doing. And I really appreciate you guys coming on and everything you guys have brought to the table. Dave Fitzgerald also has a Patreon. His wife had to make for him. That's right. Don't let him lie to you. Listen, either way, you got to help these guys out. I'm asking for help to help these guys. That's me up front. I'm just plugging. Shameless, I know. I just do it. And we're going to get into Joseph Smith's death today. What an interesting journey it's been so far. HBO, every freaking platform out there, Netflix. Are you guys paying attention? You really, really should, because this is a side of Mormon history you don't hear from Mormons. You won't hear from Mormons. And so with that being said, we have the host of Naked Mormonism podcast, Bryce Blankenagle, and the author of The Complete Heretic's Guide to Western Religions, the Mormons, Dave Fitzgerald. And I'm going to exit the scene here, guys, because this is going to be a longer video than usual, and it's going to probe in deep on what is about to happen to yours truly, the prophet himself. Thank you guys for joining the show.
So, David,
Indeed.
this story has been told a lot of times.
Yeah, this is the Last Supper and Easter story all wrapped up in one for the LDS Church. Yeah, it
is, and you can't help but like look back. You know, we're 20 some odd episodes into this journey and whatnot, and like we typically end every biography of Joseph Smith, every history book of early Mormonism, it ends right here with the death of Joseph Smith. Yeah. But as you know, and as our listeners, viewers probably know, that this is kind of the end of just the beginning, right?
Exactly.
Because it's only just starting in the grand scheme of things.
And the things that happen just immediately after what should be chapter in, the end, last chapter, blow my mind. The stuff that's happened immediately afterwards are fascinating.
Yeah. So the thing about Joseph Smith is that we have learned about him we've learned about a secular history of this individual. Because this is the story of Carthage is a story that believing Mormons know by heart. And they, missionaries teach and they reflect on it in ensign articles. And it's a common story that's told in church. But
I love your quote.
The context.
I love your quote. It said almost any Mormon can tell you the story of Carthage Jail without knowing knowing almost nothing about it.
Yeah, because that really is it. There's so many more details to this. Mormons aren't even aware that their prophet put an entire state and arguably the whole country on the precipice of civil war. And that alone highlights this individual as just larger than life. There's more to him than just the human that is Joseph Smith. There's so much more to this story. So as we know, the day of June 27th, 1844, Governor Thomas Ford was down, in this area trying to handle things personally. He had told Joseph that he was going to take him with him to visit Nauvoo, but realized that if Thomas Ford brought the prophet back to Nauvoo, that it would be impossible to bring him back to Carthage and get him reincarcerated.
Know what would happen on the way there or back. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. So, Thomas Ford made the trip to Nauvoo himself. And then as he was returning to Carthage, they intercepted the rider that told them that Joseph Smith had died. And that is, what do you do in that situation? Because suddenly, he wasn't expecting this. He had some thoughts that it might happen, but he wasn't sure that this was going to happen. And then just receiving the confirmation. Yeah. What do you do in this situation?
And I think the quote he said was, "We were all of us struck dumb by the news," and he was aware of that. things could get really, really bad now.
This is what he said. The intelligence seemed to strike everyone with a kind of dumbness. As to myself, it was perfectly astounding, and I anticipated the very worst consequences from it. The Mormons had been represented to me as a lawless, infatuated, and fanatical people, not governed by the ordinary motives which influence the rest of mankind. If so, most likely an exterminating war would ensue, and the whole land would be covered with desolation.
And that's an incredible quote, to think that that's what's going through his mind.
And he's not wrong.
And he's not wrong.
He's not wrong, right? And like he had put in various insurance levels to make it so that Joseph wouldn't be assassinated, right? Having the citizens of Carthage be his guards, because Carthage would be the first settlement the Mormons would burn if anything bad happened. Yeah. Himself, knowing that he would be assassinated by the Mormons, right. The governor would be assassinated if they learned that this had happened. Yeah. So he had put in those levels of insurance, and all of those fail-safes failed.
Yeah. Yeah.
And here's this messenger telling him this information. So let's rewind the clock a couple of hours. What happened that night? What happened that evening when Joseph and Hyrum Smith died?
Yeah.
So we know the two primary movers of the anti-Mormon movement are Levi Williams and Thomas Sharp. Thomas Sharp is the guy who's writing the Warsaw Signal. He saw the military parade and was like, what the hell? Not good, not good. So his buddy Levi Williams is a state-sanctioned militia officer, whereas Thomas Sharp is just a newspaper editor who really hates the Mormons. Well, they set out and head into Carthage because they are aware that the prophet is there with only a minimal amount of guards, and that Governor Ford is no longer there to babysit. Governor Ford is in Nauvoo.
Yeah.
So they set out, and at this time, Thomas Sharp gives a speech to the soldiers, trying to rile them up. Get them, more excited to go murder the Mormons. And, here's what Thomas Sharp apparently said. Friends and fellow citizens, the crisis has arrived when it becomes our duty to rise as free men and assert our rights. The law is insufficient for us. The governor will not enforce it. We must take it into our hands. We know what wrongs we suffer, and we are the best calculated to redress them. This is vigilante justice. That's what this is. And on somebody who's running for president of the United States. I feel like I need to reiterate that.
Exactly. And can we just put a pin in this for a second? Is this in print? Do we know he said this? How disputed is it? I know it is in dispute. And especially that sounds reasonable. It's the last part where he says, all things are understood. We must hasten to Carthage and murder the Smiths. This will so enrage the Mormons that they will fall upon and murder Tom Ford, and then be rid of the damn little governor and the Mormons too. To cheers. Yay! It's like
to cheers. Well,
a bit too Machiavellian, hand-wringy.
Mustache twiddling. I very much agree with that. And that source is John Hay, as somebody who was not a known person, but was apparently part of, he claimed to be part of the militia, claimed to not have any hand in it, to just be observing it. And then he joined the Mormons, and he got some property immediately after Carthage happened. He joined the Mormons, got some property there, and then he made this affidavit describing all of the events. And his affidavit is full with all sorts of things that make it not very credible.
Gotcha.
But we do tend to believe that the guy was an eyewitness to at least some of the events.
Gotcha.
What Thomas Sharp actually said, his is the only source that we have for it, and it's a disputed source.
And to be fair, just from the headlines we know from Thomas Sharp, the first part seems very real to me.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's the mustache twirling. Let us murder them.
Well, and that's why it plays into the Mormon martyrdom complex, right?
See, that makes perfect sense for a Mormon to say this is what they. Yes,
exactly. Well, and to add into that, our buddy Porter Rockwell, Pistol Packin' Porter Rockwell, he gave an affidavit in Utah during the Reformation era. So, about 12, 13 years after the events, that he, when he was in Nauvoo, Thomas Ford was there holding a meeting with a few people in Nauvoo, a few of the leadership, behind closed doors, and Porter Rockwell had forgotten his hat in the room, so he went in back to retrieve the hat, and at that time he heard Thomas Ford say that the deed is done, basically. Referring to the conspiracy that Thomas Ford was just like, all right, I'm going to disappear, and whatever happens to Joseph, wink, wink, get in there. But once again, that's from Porter Rockwell, a childhood friend of Joseph Smith's. Definitely not an impartial observer, and he made that affidavit, like I said, more than a decade after the events happened. Right.
And how convenient that his hat was lost just in time for that one bit of the boring movie for the whole day.
He just forgot his hat. Yeah, that happens. That's cool. Yep. So regardless, there are a couple of other figures within this this afternoon that we need to understand. And one of these figures is Frank Worrell, or Franklin Worrell. Now, Frank Worrell was the specific jail guard. So how it worked was basically they had like a platoon, a contingency of like 6 to 8 soldiers that were guarding the jail itself at any given time. And those were pulled from the ranks of the Carthage Greys that were there in town. It was a couple of divisions of Carthage Greys that were stationed in Carthage, garrisoned ready for defense or for an offense or whatever. So, about 60 to 80 guys maybe.
Right. Guys who all hate Joseph Smith as much as anybody else on the planet.
Certainly, yeah. But they also, they're part of Governor Ford's insurance policy.
Yeah.
So Frank Worrell made an alliance with Levi Williams and Thomas Sharp, these anti-Mormons who are marching to Carthage. They established communication beforehand. And Franklin Worrell, as the officer who was controlling the guard of the jail at the 4 o'clock changeover, that would be, on patrol from 4 to midnight or 4 to 10 or whatever. He was the guy, and he was friends with Thomas Sharp and Levi Williams. And they said, all right, well, we're going to rush you, and we want you to load up your gun with blank cartridges so that you have plausible deniability, right? Obviously. So that they can make it look like a defense, that an armed mob comes rushing into town. Frank Worrell and his, few guards around the jail, they shoot at the mob, but nothing happens. It's all blank cartridges.
Right. And we should say also as well, this mob is all made up of Carthage people too, who are easily recognizable to anybody in Carthage. So to get around that, they disguise themselves with like soot and gunpowder and red mud to look like to blackface. Yes, exactly.
Yep. Very common of vigilante mobs.
And funny, it's a tactic that the Mormons themselves used, the Mountain Meadows massacre.
They did, not just Mountain Meadows, all the time, actually. Yeah, very frequently in Utah. Yeah. And the River Rats as well. They disguise themselves because they were recognizable, right? So it's a common tactic that if you're going to go do crime, you just paint your face black, and then nobody can recognize you. And if they do, then they keep their mouth shut.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this alliance's communication was established, and at this time, General Deming, of course, was one of the few that Thomas Ford had put in charge of the entire Carthage Greys to take care of it. And Governor Ford told him to flee if menaced by a superior force.
And boop.
Yeah. So at about 10 after 5 p.m., this superior force appears on the horizon, marching into Carthage. I'm sorry. And they come in from the road to Nauvoo. So the people who are in town aren't sure what this is. This looks like it could be a Mormon mob.
Yeah.
And nobody knows what to expect. So the citizens of Carthage that are out there that see this mob begin descending on the jail, they start packing their bags. They're not dumb. They know that something is about to happen, and whatever is about to happen, they don't want to be in Carthage anymore because this is bad news.
And as soon as by the end of the day, Carthage is going to be a ghost town, a literal ghost town.
Yes. Yep. Only a few people there. Yep.
Totally
exactly.
abandoned. Yeah.
Yeah. So the force marches in, and they fire 3 gunshots in the air, which signaled to Frank Worrell and his guards that the assault had begun. And at that point, Frank Worrell, his guards, they get in military ranks guarding the jailhouse, and that's when the mob clashes against them. And Frank Worrell and his boys, they fire their guns, but because of the little arrangement, those guns were filled with blank cartridges. And then they just kind of like, oh, come on, you get out of here, you.
Don't do it.
No, don't come in. No, don't hurt him. And I really hope that we have the ability to screen share here, because I want to show just some visualizations of what Carthage kind of looks like here. So here is the courtyard of the Carthage jail, right? And this is this wall is, I believe, north facing, and this is the direction that they would have come into, right? So here's this is an addition that was built on, but when you walk through this door, this is where you go into the kitchen area, and that's where the first area is that you enter the building, and there are a few entrances into it. So they come into this door here, and the Frank Worrell and his boys, it's like 6-8 guys. This is a force of 150 to 200 guys. That even if their guns weren't filled with blank cartridges, that it wasn't. What could they do, right? So the prisoners here. Now let's review who the prisoners are. We have Joseph Smith and Hyrum Smith, Hyrum being his older brother, as well as patriarch of the church. And then we have a good friend and counselor to Joseph Smith, John Taylor. Now, John Taylor is somebody who would go on to be a leader in the Utah church, and we'll discuss that a little bit in a few minutes. And then we have Willard Richards, Dr. Willard Richards. He was an herbal physician, as well as a scribe of Joseph Smith. And I'm very much of the opinion that this guy was keeping Joseph Smith, amped up for all of these, because there were many sleepless nights for this guy. And I'm of the opinion that the doctor was keeping old Joe pretty strung out to keep him firing and going during all of this. And
it seems a perfect place to add that Bryce has done an amazing job on researching pharmacological issues in early Mormon history that are fascinating, not just here, but all from the very beginning.
Yeah, well, which really is kind of the only reason that I mention it, that Joseph Smith always had an herbal physician very close to him. And, that's not uncommon of many demagogues and tyrants that are strung out on all sorts of things during the day, and then they take downers to sleep at night. I think Joseph Smith definitely fell into that camp. So this jail cell, this whole jail building gets surrounded, and the prisoners understand that these are not their people. These are not the Mormons here. That's in the actual jailhouse. Let me find a proper picture of once they get inside, right? So they get inside, they push through. It's a bunch of guys pushing in through this building, this little tiny jail cell. Now, I also want to note that at this time, right before they had left town, 2 guys had smuggled pistols in to Joseph Smith. This pistol right here was given to Joseph by a guy named John S. Fulmer. And John S. Fulmer was one of the messengers, one of the friends that was in the town, and was chased out of Carthage. So he took this pistol, gave it to Joseph Smith. Then another guy came along named Cyrus Wheelock, and Cyrus Wheelock gave him this little pepper box pistol. Now, this is a precursor to a revolver, in that it has 5 or 6 revolving barrels here that each have their own little nipple, explosive nipple, and then this or cap, and then this hammer right here drops on the nipple, and all 6 of those barrels rotate. So this is an Allen and Thurber pepper box pistol, and I've held one of these things. They're delightful little guns.
And incidentally, both these guns exist in a Mormon museum. And they don't make any bones about, these are the guns that they had. So
You can see this in downtown Salt Lake City, just outside of Temple Square in the Church History Museum. They have these in a little display case. Yeah. So when this pepperbox pistol was handed to Joseph Smith, he handed this single shot to his brother, Hyrum. Now, what these guys are going to do with these pistols, I think that's probably up for dispute. Who knows?
Right.
What good is a single shot pistol if you're going to be attacked by a mob? That's for one useful shot, right? That's to kill yourself. A pepperbox pistol, it may be effective in close quarters combat, like in a hallway type of situation, right. But you're not holding off an army with a pepperbox pistol. It's just these are just the things. Like what was the purpose of having these guns? I don't know. I don't know what the logic behind it was, but both Joseph and Hyrum had guns.
Yeah. Should we get into that he also had wine and tobacco that night too?
He did. Right. So Stephen Markham, he had sent Stephen Markham to go pick up wine and 2 papers of tobacco. And Stephen Markham had gotten chased out of town before he was able to deliver the goods to him. So Joseph asked the jailer, George Stiegel, like, hey, what happened to Stephen? And he's like, that guy, he got the hell out of here. They were chasing him out. So Joe requested that the jailer actually bring them the supplies and gave him $2.50 for it. And the jailer said, no, $1.20 is enough. And
took his 13 pieces of silver for the wine.
Yep. Exactly. Yep. So yeah, this happened about an hour and a half, 2 hours before the mob began descending. Right. So these guys are, they've been smoking their tobacco and they've been, imbibing, drinking a little bit. And of course we know that the mob themselves were probably, many of them were pretty lit as well.
Sure. And these are all just fun facts that you should ask your Mormon missionary next time they show at your door.
Certainly. Yeah. Joseph Smith was drunk when he was murdered. Yes. So as we continue on through the house, right? So the mob gets in, they push in through this feigned defense. They get past the areas in the house that are in the lower areas, and then they begin pushing up. They see that the prisoners are not down here in the jail cell. They begin pushing up through the stairs, and you can see the stairs here. Are pretty narrow. I have another shot of the stairs, but they push in. They find that the jail cell here is empty. That the prisoners are not in the actual jail cells, but that they are instead in the room next to it. Yeah. Now this is the hallway, and if I'm standing in this hallway, my shoulders are basically touching both sides. Or if I move my arms out a little bit, my elbows are touching both sides. But we have a group of 150 guys trying to push up these stairs and into this tiny hallway. Yeah. And this tiny hallway, you can see it here. Like this is the banister that goes around the stairs, right? So they push in. This is a window that leads outside. Directly behind where I'm taking this picture from is the jail cells with all the hay and the shackles on the ground. That's directly behind us. Now to the left right here, this is the doorway into the debtor's prison where the prisoners were staying, where they had slept that night before. So the men push up the stairs, right? So here's the banister. The stairs run this way. They push up the stairs and they fire their weapons into the door of the jail cell, thinking that that's where the prisoners were. But there was no reaction. They pushed into the door. They saw that the prisoners weren't there. And then they instead turned over to this door, which is this room right here. This is the debtor's prison on the 2nd floor of Carthage Jail. And at this time, of course, like the prisoners knew they're dead. Yeah. They're dead. Yeah. And Willard Richards even recounted what happened. Let me stop sharing. Sorry about that. He tells the prophet that, he looked out the window and that, he doesn't know who those people are out there. This is not good.
Yeah.
This is not good.
And it for what it's worth, it could have been the Nauvoo Legion. You could think that they were, this group is coming up on the Carthage Road. Maybe, but
maybe.
No, it was not to be. Not this time.
No.
Yeah.
So in all of this, right? So the jail itself is surrounded. There is no escape. There is you hear clamoring all downstairs, gunshots outside the door. You're backed into a corner. You're a cornered animal, and there is no option. There's not a whole lot that you can do in this situation. Now, I want to spend a little bit of time on some alternative theories near the end here, because once we discuss kind of the sequence of events, we'll be able to piece together some pictures of what happened in all of this, and what people explore as alternative theories, because I think that is a fascinating subject. Regardless, the men push up the stairs and they realize that the prisoners are in the debtor's prison, and they push against that door. They try to gain entry into that room. And at this point, Joseph, Hyrum, John Taylor, Willard Richards, they push their, weight against the door, trying to hold it. The guys get in the door, they're all dead. They know it. Everybody knows it. This mob is not here to have a court of inquiry, right? They're not here to play patty cake. They're here to murder people.
Yeah.
So they're pushing all their weight against the door. John Taylor and Willard Richards, they grab their canes. One of them grabbed Stephen Markham's cane, and they grab these canes for self-defense. They can use them as blunt objects or whatever the case is going to be.
They're called rascal beaters.
Rascal beaters, that's right. Yep, good old rascal beaters.
Mm.
And at this point, Hyrum and Joseph are pushing against the door. Hyrum begins to pull out his pistol, but he is pushed against the door. And if you kind of envision this, how he was doing this, it was basically an arm and a shoulder against the door, and him kind of leaning down, looking down slightly. And a ball is fired through the door. Now, I don't think I took a picture of the hole because they have a recreated door that has a hole at about the right spot in it. But the latch on the door itself didn't work. So it was just the physical force of these men pushing against each other with a small wooden plank dividing them. So one ball fires through the door, and it hits Hyrum on the left side of his nose and enters into his skull, and probably comes out the back of his head, or it embeds in his skull somewhere. And at that point, Hyrum just falls back. He falls back from the door, right? Because you're shot in the face. The energy from the ball going in and your body getting away from the danger, pushing yourself away. He fell back from the door and just landed on the ground.
He's done. Yeah,
he's done. Yeah, and it was claimed that he says, "I'm shot. I'm a dead man," or whatever.
Man, yeah.
Yeah, like no, it was gargly noises probably.
Yeah, at best.
At best, yeah. So he falls, and Joseph sees his older brother fall down, now with blood coming out of his head, and realizes this place means business. So at this point, Joe peels away to look at his brother or whatever, and he sees Hyrum is dead, and he pulls the pepperbox pistol out of his pocket. And at this point, it's just John Taylor and Willard Richards who are holding the door closed against a force of, 10 to 12 men that can fit in that little tiny space that are pushing against the door. So they're beginning to be able to push in, and they're sticking their gun barrels through the crack in the door and firing into the room, just filling it with explosions and with smoke. And John Taylor recounts this as he talked about them belching their infernal death. And he's very graphic because he's seeing all of these guns are sticking through the door right in front of his face as he's holding it shut and firing into the ground, right? I mean, you remember these things. These are your starkest memories.
Yeah, the noise of this screaming mob, howling mob coming to kill you, and the smoke, the gunpowder, everything about it must have just been a nightmare. Yeah.
And it's a hot July afternoon too, on the banks of the Mississippi. It's hot, muggy, everybody's uncomfortable, everybody's cranky, a lot of people are drunk. It's not a good situation. It's all it's bad. It's really bad, right?
Yeah.
So Joe uses those men pushing their guns through the barrel. He uses that same crack with his left hand. He sticks the pepperbox pistol outside of the door and fires it. And pepperbox pistols, they're repeat fire, which, you know, cartridge guns are not yet invented. Cartridge rounds don't come until about the 1850s, late 40s, early 50s. It was Civil War before the cartridge guns actually were implemented in wartime. These are all muzzleloader guns, and very few guns have repeating actions, but pepperbox pistols do. So he just click, 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 fires as many as he can, and it's reported that at least 3 of those barrels discharged and indeed did hit people.
Didn't kill anybody, but he did hit 3.
Yeah. Now it's disputed because John Taylor claimed that 2 of the men died and 1 of them was wounded from it. But the other sources, there are no contemporary sources that say that indeed these men died. But they were critically injured, according to the court records that happened, you know, a year after this.
I kind of love the description of the 3 men who took bullets from Joseph Smith.
Oh yeah, give us the quote.
He shot an Irishman named Wills, who was in the affair from his congenital love of a brawl. Oh, that harp! You know those harps and their Donnybrooks. Gallagher, a southerner from Mississippi, bought him in the face. Voorhees, a half-grown hobbledehoy from Bear Creek.
Hobbledehoy,
which, as we all know, is a clumsy or awkward youth.
Yeah.
Oh, and of course, and another gentleman whose name I will not mention, as he's prepared to prove an alibi. And besides that, he stands 6'2" in his moccasins.
In his moccasins. Well, that says it in his moccasins too, right? And this is a hearing. This is part of the hearing, right? This is the court hearing where this guy is telling the details of these people that were shot by Joseph Smith. But like we said, there's no evidence that Joseph actually killed anybody in all of this. Mostly because these pepperbox pistols, they're unless you load them really hot, they're not that powerful. It's a relatively small caliber round, and it's a round bullet, and it may pass through or may not be able to expend all of its energy. It's not a hollow point, right? It's not modern technology. It's not modern ballistics. Guns are just a lot less deadly back then, as opposed to now.
Rifled. You didn't even know where the bullet was going to go, half the time.
Yeah, for sure. And also, to be clear, like, he's just sticking it out a door and firing into a mob of people, right? He's gonna hit people,
right?
You're gonna hit people.
Fish in a barrel. Yeah,
for sure. So he fires those rounds, and what happens is the mob recoil from this, right? Because they're the ones firing the guns, and suddenly there's a gun being fired back at them. They have to take a step back, take stock of the situation, and likely change out guns, right? So this is how firing lines would work: is either you have the firing lines and everybody mans their own guns, where you fire and then you take the 20 to 40 seconds to reload, and then you fire the next salvo, and then you reload next salvo, or you have gunmen that sit behind and they reload the guns for the actual marksman. So you fire all the guns through the door. You have to bring those guns back, push them back down the line, and get to the front of the line guns that are loaded, because it takes too long to, everything we're describing is happening in 20 seconds.
Yeah.
They don't have time to reload.
Right. Yeah, if you saw Last of the Mohicans, they did a pretty decent job of showing the awkwardness of dealing with these kind of rifles.
Okay, I haven't seen it, but it's Dances
like
with Wolves did it as well.
Shot, okay, hand me another
one
gun,
shot,
or take another. Maybe a good marksman could get 3 shots in a minute, maybe.
Yeah, and that was truly expert marksman. With reloading their own guns, absolutely. So like those are some of the limitations of this right? And it seems as if most of the men were coming in with rifles, and that repeating pistols weren't weren't utilized much by the mob. They seem to be using rifles in all of this.
Yeah.
And there could be various reasons for that. Mostly that they're state-sanctioned militia.
Well, the other thing I was thinking is those pistols have, for 1844, that's pretty high-tech shit.
For sure.
They must have been really expensive too.
Yeah, the Allen and Thurber, specifically the Allen and Thurber pistol that Joseph Smith had, the patent on that pepperbox pistol was 1837.
Wow.
Right, so this is cutting edge technology. These pepperbox pistols.
Yeah,
for sure. So the mob recoils for a second. They realize that the prisoners were armed. They were not expecting that. Now they have to decide, how armed are they? Because if they push further into the room and they have more pistols, that means more of the mob are going to get hit, and they don't want that. They only want to attack. Vigilante mobs, they only want to attack when it's superior forces, when they know they're going to win the fight.
Yeah.
But now there's an element of uncertainty of like, we just got shot at. How many guns? How many of them have guns? How many guns are in there? So that causes a momentary pause. And it was in this momentary pause that Joseph Smith and John Taylor decided to act, because there's still pressure from the door. Joseph Smith goes back to pushing against the door, and the men, they pull their guns back or whatever the case is. Joseph and John Taylor realize that this is their moment to try and break for it. So John Taylor and Joseph Smith turn around and begin to run for the window. Now, let me show this window here and just the general layout of the apartment, right? So we have here, got to share the screen once again. So this is once again that doorway, right? So, or the upstairs, right? So here's the banister, here's the stairs right down here. Here's the door that goes into the debtor's apartment where this gunfight is happening. This is that very door that they're pushing against. Once you're in this room, you walk in, it's a pretty small room. Here's a window. This window goes to the south. And then this window, though, of course, the window that I'm obstructing here, that I'm in front of. Yeah, this is the window that leads out to the courtyard that we saw earlier.
Yeah.
That window that I'm standing in front of is this window right up here. This is I believe, the east side of the jail. Over here is the north side where they pushed in. Right. So Joseph and John Taylor both make a break for this window. They think that if they can get out the window, then maybe they have a chance to survive. And what that means is Willard Richards was the only person left with his rascal beater trying to hold the door and to hit the barrels of the rifles with the rascal beater as they're pushing through the door. Willard Richards is a big, big dude, but he's not a dozen dudes big dude.
Right.
He can't match him. So he just gets pushed back, and as they push the door open, they pin him against the wall, between the door and the wall.
Yeah. And when we're talking big, we're talking over 300 pounds, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah.
Yes, very much so.
Hodor, size.
Yeah, he's Hodor. Yeah, for sure. And he's a relatively big guy as well. He's not just rotund, but he's also of a fairly large build.
Yeah.
So he gets it. He gets pressed all the way against the wall as the mob is pushing into the door.
Yeah.
And as this is happening, right, as he's getting pushed against that wall and pinned, Joseph and John Taylor are running away from the door, away from the mob, towards that window that I was pointing out earlier.
Yeah.
And they get shot, and they get shot a lot. They get shot hard.
Because when they look out the window, what they don't see is a free and clear way to escape. They see 100 other rifles pointed at them. Yeah.
That's right. Pointed at them from down below. So John Taylor, a little faster than Joe, or maybe Joe was like looking back at Hyrum. I'm not sure. John Taylor is the first to get to the window. Now, as John Taylor is stepping, the first bullet he takes hits him in the leg, and it breaks his leg. So he basically immediately collapses, and he falls against the windowsill. And breaks his pocket watch. The pocket watch that's in his breast pocket, he lands against the windowsill and breaks the pocket watch, which marks the time. The Church History Library has that very pocket watch. It has marked the time that the time stopped was when this assassination happened. And I think it's
5:16 and 21 seconds.
5:16:21. Thank you. Good numbers.
Mm.
So he gets shot in the leg, and that's when he collapses. And he sees out at the window as he's leaning against the windowsill. He looks down into the courtyard, and like you said, David, there's 100 guys out there, all of them pointing their guns at that window. So reflexes, John Taylor calls it a supreme force or an angel that saved him. I call it reflexes. He pushes himself away from the windowsill, and he turns and sees that there's the huge mob pushing into the door. there's no way out. There's nothing you can do.
Yeah.
So he thinks quick and rolls under the bed. And as he is rolling under the bed, he takes, I think, 2 more shots or 3 more shots.
Yeah. I think eventually 3 more. Yeah. Let's see. Second one shot him in the left knee, which traveled up his thigh and embedded near his groin. That's gotta be one. Third bullet entered his left arm near the elbow, ripped through muscle and tendon all the way up his arm, crushed through his wrist joint, and came to a halt a little above the upper joint of my little finger.
Right. Well, and that shows you what he was doing, right? So he was laying down with the mob towards his feet, and he was covering his head, right? So he gets shot in the knee, and it travels up and lodges in his groin. Gets shot in the elbow, and it travels up his arm, lodges in the wrist or in the hand. So that's kind of his configuration. He's guarding himself, and then he begins to tuck and roll, and that's when he gets shot in the leg, and it rips off a chunk of his hip.
The size of his fist, apparently.
The size of his fist. And he begins bleeding profusely from this. And, this obviously, I mean, this sprays, blood and gibs all over the floor. This turns into a very bloody mess pretty quickly. Yeah. So he rolls under the bed. He's waiting for his death because, he's shot 4 times already. It's only a matter of time before they drag him out from under the bed and just execute him, right? Yeah. He thinks he's dead. Willard Richards, obviously pinned against the door, sees John Taylor go down at the same time that Joseph Smith catches a couple of balls in the back.
Yeah.
And at this time, Joseph makes the record isn't clear what happens. Actually, when I say the record isn't clear, the accounts dispute each other a little bit.
Yeah.
And this makes for a really interesting a couple of possible scenarios for what happened to Joseph in this. Because convention says that he was shot. The martyrdom version says that he felt that he could save the lives of his friends if he dove out the window. Which I think is hogwash. Now, you're not looking to preserve your friend's life in that. You're saving your own life in this.
Let me save you by running away to safety. Yes.
Yeah, right. He bravely fled. Yeah. But another account, another couple of accounts, and this is fleshed out in the court hearing after all of this, says that he basically sat on the windowsill and tried to bargain with the mob for a minute. Now, to be clear, the mob from the doorway, the hallway, aren't the only ones shooting. There are men also shooting from outside into the Carthage, into the jail cell window, right? So if we look at the jail itself here, right, we see this broad side of this building. This is the window that John Taylor, he hit on the windowsill and then pushed himself back. Same window that Joseph Smith has hit, approaching himself.
Yeah.
This whole area is surrounded by men that are just shooting like crazy. They're trying to shoot into this. And I believe the coroner counted 35 bullets that were embedded into the brickwork as well as the roof inside of the room in the ceiling above this window, because the guns obviously were fired from a downward angle up into that window.
Yeah.
So that in all of this, right, like those men are also shooting into the window. There are men who are trying to get further away from the jail so that they could get a more level shot into the window, maybe use a nearby hill to get shots. But the accuracy of these guns is horrible, of course, so it's not very effective.
Insert grassy knoll joke here. Anyway.
Yeah, that's right. So within all of this, right, it's disputed whether or not Joseph dove immediately when he got to the window, or if he sat there for a second and was shot and then fell out, or if he sat there for a few minutes and tried to bargain with the men that were out in the courtyard, which would have been Levi Williams and Thomas Sharp and Frank Worrell and, the leaders of these anti-Mormons, right?
And to be fair, all of these scenarios are perfectly plausible, knowing what we know.
Perfectly. Yeah, and one of my favorite accounts says that he ran up to the window and he gave the Masonic cry for help, which is elevating both hands above his head and saying, "Oh God, is there no help for the widow's son?"
Yeah, which is fascinating to me. That, go on with that, because the fact that was so powerful that's what he thought might save his life. And
yeah. And if that is indeed the case, then it would be expected that the Masons within the mob would have stopped firing, because this is a member of the fraternity, and you are You're murdering a member of the fraternity. That's a big no-no in Masonry.
And you said something very interesting in your podcast that for the non-Masons, it was, hey, you're about to kill a master Mason. Do you really want to do that? It's like,
that's right.
I don't think we have any idea how powerfully, if not the actual power, the thought of powerful Freemasonry was in the early 19th century. It just doesn't. Yeah. We don't really have a sense of that.
We haven't spent much time on it here because it doesn't hold a lot of explanatory power for a lot of what we discuss, but it does once we examine how powerful Nauvoo was getting and how powerful the Nauvoo Lodge itself was getting, how many Masons were being recruited into the Mormon Nauvoo Lodge. Was beginning to outnumber the number of Masons in the entire state of Illinois, which was making Masons mad because it's defiling the sacred rites. It's ascending people who are not prepared to ascend, and it's diluting the power of the Masons that remain there in the state that are legitimately ascended. So there's a lot of problems with the Masons are seeing with Joseph Smith being so power hungry, but then there's also the you said fear, I say reverence that society held, or maybe not reverence.
They knew they were a force to be reckoned with, would you say?
Yeah, the notoriety that Masonry had for non-Masons, right? Because it was seen as a shadow political force. It was something that,
deep state. Yeah, exactly.
It's the deep state, right? Yeah. And that existed long before David Icke and, in our modern era, right? Like those concepts have always existed.
And they actually had political parties that were nothing but their only platform was anti-Masonic party. That's how.
Yeah. And even Joe's ghostwriter, William Mines Phelps, got his start as an editor of an anti-Masonic paper in New York, right? So like it was anti-Masonry was its own political movement to try and resist the power that people perceived that Freemasonry had in politics.
And that occurs to me too. It's fascinating that even in the Mormon community, there were Masons and anti-Masons.
There was, certainly. Yep.
Yeah.
And at different times in his life, Joseph Smith has been painted as Masonic as well as anti-Masonic.
Sure.
There's definitely some confounding features in all of this, right? So Joseph Smith, as the most powerful man in the state, I would argue far more powerful than Governor Ford. He just had yet to realize his potential power to utilize it, right? Yeah. But the most powerful man in the state of Illinois, running for president of the United States, gives the Masonic cry for help. The Masons are going to stop shooting. And that provides the explanatory power that I need to understand the timeline of how this worked, because he gives the cry for help and then he remains in the windowsill for the span of maybe 1 to 2 minutes. Now, everything that's happening is happening in the span of, 5 seconds, 10 seconds. We've taken 20 minutes to describe something that's going on in 30 seconds, right? Yes. So to be stuck there in that windowsill, petitioning your fellow Masons to not shoot you with 2 bullets already in you and internal bleeding, and trying to plead for your own life in this situation. Eventually, a man shouts out from the crowd, "Shoot the rat anyway." And it's at that point that Joseph probably takes another shot from inside or maybe from outside. He falls out of the window, and the best way that I can understand it from his injuries is he falls out of the window and lands shoulder first and then cracks his head on the ground below. And this is dirt, right? This
so basically a 2-story head first fall onto hard earth. Yeah.
Yeah. And it seems that he survived the fall. Because at that moment, somebody from the mob, the disputed account that we talked about earlier, names the person, and it's impossible that it is that person, because it harkens all the way back to the Missouri Mormon War, and it's impossible that person was there, regardless. But somebody grabs the nearly dead Joseph Smith, who's lost a lot of blood, has multiple bullets in him. They drag him. Let me show the screen what this looks like and why this is such an infamous courtyard. He falls out of the window, lands right here on the ground below. They drag him up against this well right here, and they execute him.
Yeah.
With with shots not to the head or to the chest, but to center mass, to the stomach.
Shoot him in his gut. So gut shot. That's the
gut shot, which is a really horrible way to execute somebody. It's a painful way to execute somebody.
And it's like, he may not die today, he may not die tomorrow, but he's a dead man.
He's gonna die. Yeah. He's gonna die. Yeah. Yep. And Joseph Smith died right there, in that courtyard after being gunned down. As best I could tell, I think it's 5 shots that he took. Could be 4, could be 6. It's kind of hard to tell. John Taylor had at least 4 shots in him. Yeah. Hyrum Smith in all of this.
1 shot. Boom.
1 shot, which is really interesting. So it's the 1 shot that hit underneath his nose and embedded somewhere in his head, maybe hit his brainstem. I don't know.
Yeah.
But afterwards, the mob came back up to examine the other members, the other prisoners. Yeah. Because when Joseph Smith goes out the window, the entire mob funnels out and they go surround the prophet and then they execute him, right? Yeah. So for a very short period of time, the upstairs debtor's prison that all this action happened was empty except for Hyrum Smith, dead, John Taylor bleeding out, and Willard Richards, who had been pushed behind the door, did catch a bullet to the ear. It did skim his ear.
That's true. But if there was an angel protecting anybody that night, it was Willard Richards, who came out from behind that door. He'd been crushed behind, and he's basically intact and fine, except for the grazing wound.
So Richards thinks that John Taylor's dead. He sees Hyrum is very dead. He hears Joseph outside, fall, hit the ground, and then hears more gunshots. Suspects Joseph is dead as well. Willard Richards begins to run out the door to go to try and either slink out a window where the mob isn't, because their attention is all on the front courtyard. They're no longer nobody is like paying any attention to what's on the other side of the building. He can slink out a window. He might be able to get out of town, right? Now, I want to also mention here, the Carthage Greys catch a lot of flack for being the guards on duty at that time, right? And it was a very small division of Carthage Greys that were actually stationed in Carthage at this time, and they were stationed about a quarter of a mile away, right? So the mob descends into Carthage. They make the attack on the jail, and the attack is over by the time that the Carthage Greys are able to cover the distance to get to the jail. So the Carthage Greys weren't involved in this except for Frank Worrell, who loaded his guns with blank cartridges. And
it goes to show how much time 2 minutes tops, 3 minutes, boom. And then it's over just that fast.
And and the Carthage Greys, they get to the jail and Joe's already dead. The mob is already beginning to disperse in all directions, all directions, everywhere. They just could get out. They knew that the deed was done. They were trying to get away before the Mormons caught wind and came in and burned the town to the ground, right? And when this is going on, when the gunshots are going off, all of the citizens realize something is going on at the jail. They start packing faster. They start heading to Warsaw. To get to Warsaw, maybe even get across the river, head down to Quincy, head over to Iowa, head over to Missouri, whatever. They have to get the hell out of Carthage,
right?
Because the Mormons will be coming back with a vengeance, and they will burn that place to the ground and salt the ground on which Carthage used to stand.
Old Testament style, Yep.
Yes, it's very poetic.
And there is nothing implausible about that scenario either.
No, not at all, right? So in all of this, right, so Willard Richards sees the situation. He attempts to escape, and he hears John Taylor call from under the bed, "Wait, take me with you." As he's probably choking up blood. Who knows, right? Like John Taylor got riddled with bullets.
He's a mess. Yeah.
So Willard Richards realizes, I can't get John Taylor out of this room and out of the jail without somebody noticing. I don't know what to do. So what Willard Richards did was dragged John Taylor from the debtor's prison into the jail cells. And the jail cells themselves don't look to be that comfortable, regardless of who you are. Hard wooden floors and shackles. They really kind of suck, no matter who you are. But when you're somebody with bullets in you, your life threatened. Willard Richards drags John Taylor into one of these cells and takes an old straw mattress and covers him up.
Yeah.
And and John Taylor
also puts puts straw into his wounds to help staunch it up.
To help the blood coagulate, right? He's a doctor, right? And John Taylor remembers this as the most excruciating pain of his entire life, right?
I well believe it too, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, of course. He has a chunk of flesh the size of his fist missing from his hip, right? The guy walked with a limp for the rest of his life from this gunfight.
And meanwhile, both him and Richards are sure that these guys are just going to come up and finish the job and kill them dead in moments,
Yeah, which isn't unreasonable because the mob did come back up the stairs and they made sure the job was done. They couldn't find, maybe they were too hasty in their looking or whatever the case was, but they couldn't find the two other people, Willard Richards and John Taylor, but they did find basically the corpse of Hyrum Smith, and they made sure that it was a corpse by shooting him center mass multiple more times. And we think that he was dead by that time because there aren't any blood marks around those bullet holes. He had probably pretty much bled out by that time from his head wound.
Yeah.
Also notably as well, while he was, after he had been shot in the head and fallen back, he did take a couple of shots that grazed his chest and embedded into the bottom of his jaw. He was probably dead or nearly dead when these shots hit him, but one also embedded into his hip and stuff. But these were not fatal shots because the fatal shot had already been done.
Yeah. And maybe he was the lucky one after all. Yeah.
Yeah, to go so quick, for sure. I would prefer that death over John Taylor or Joseph Smith, for sure, every time. So now becomes a few big questions. What is to be done? What do we do to keep this situation from being the powder keg igniting? How does Governor Ford handle this situation? How do the Mormon leadership handle this situation? How does the news get broken to the Mormons that Joseph and Hyrum are dead because Thomas Ford intercepted the messengers who were headed to Nauvoo to tell the Mormons at 6 o'clock at night, 6:30 at night, as they were headed back into Carthage to check up on Joseph Smith.
Yeah,
they received the messengers that the mission's over, right? Yeah. So what do you do in this situation? I want to let me think here. Because I want to deal with some conspiracy as well, because a lot of people do say that, Willard Richards, he wasn't even hurt in all of this.
Right.
He must have been working with Brigham Young to assassinate Joseph Smith.
Which is ridiculous on so many levels. To think
sure it is. And there are also a lot of people who believe it. The way that I go about trying to, my phrase is skepticize everything. The way that I try and skepticize that is Brigham Young was in Boston holding public meetings at this time. For him to have orchestrated this, he would have had to orchestrate the Nauvoo Expositor, the city's response to the Nauvoo Expositor, Governor Ford going out there and responding to the riot that ensued after that. He'd have to orchestrate all of the machinations of Levi Williams and Thomas Sharp. He would have had to orchestrate so many things that are just so far outside the boundaries.
Exactly. And he'd have to do it before telegraph. So he would have to do it by sending out ravens to all his minions to make this all happen. Yeah.
I mean, you can choose to believe that if you want. Yeah. But there also is the claim that John Taylor, when he was nearly dead, brokered a deal with Willard Richards that if John Taylor survives this, then he will be made prophet after Brigham Young. Once again, Dr. Willard Richards was a doctor, and he was somebody who was there on hand to immediately attend to John Taylor's wounds. Yeah. And probably had Dr. Richards not been there or had a functioning knowledge of human anatomy, right, John Taylor would have died.
Yeah.
So he saved John Taylor's life in all of this.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely.
And then there's the mysteries about, Willard Richards' death. Did he happen upon something that Brigham Young didn't like in 1856 and then he wanted to get rid of it? Or was, Willard Richards threatening to go public with the whole conspiracy in Carthage? And I don't lend a whole lot of credence to those things.
What do you think of the possibility that on the other side, the anti-Mormons did this to deliberately get the governor killed in Nauvoo?
That wouldn't surprise me at all, actually. I also don't find it very credible that Thomas Ford wanted this to happen. I think that Ford wanted the Joseph Smith problem to be dealt with. Yeah. He didn't know what that dealing with. He wanted it to not be a problem anymore, and that his life would be a lot easier if Joseph Smith were dead. But that would inevitably make his life so much harder because then his state would be in civil war. So he didn't want Joseph Smith to be murdered. He wanted Joseph to not be a problem anymore, which is why he was vigorously pursuing this through the legal system.
So that he could be put on trial for treason and hung like
he should have been.
Like he should have been, yeah.
A firing squad, yes. He should have faced a court-martial, right? He's a state-sanctioned militia officer. He incited a rebellion, a mob that squashed free speech and then declared martial law in his city and arrested anybody who entered or exited, right? Like he was a tyrant. He was absolutely a tyrant. He should have faced a court-martial for treason and been assassinated or been shot.
And that it's fascinating to think what would happen to the church then. Then their whole story would be his martyrdom at the firing squad. And
what more Jesus symbolism do you need, right?
Exactly.
It only would have been more martyrdom-ish if they would have actually crucified him.
And yeah, absolutely. And it's funny, we didn't bring up the fact that all the Mormon folklore that surrounds this night, and like the kid who tried to decapitate Joseph Smith with a Bowie knife and was chased off by a beam of light or something like that.
Yeah, and the lightning striking and scaring off the mob as they were trying to take his head off. And there's a ton of Mormon folklore, and a lot of it comes from just that one disputed account, right? Yeah. That one that we talked about earlier. And hearing the voice of God booming from the clouds, and there's a ton of folklore around this because it's a tragic and traumatic event for the Mormons.
Sure.
Yeah. And your mind is going to come up with all sorts of ways to view this within the larger picture of God's plan for his chosen people.
Yeah, because that's what religions do, especially apocalyptic religions. But anytime you get a religion that people are so invested in because they've literally died for it, they've suffered for it, generations of them by now have suffered for it. You just don't turn that off by, a snappy argument or, your prophet losing.
Well, and a very intelligent author once told me that persecution is like fertilizer, right? And every religion needs a little bit of it just to keep it healthy.
Yeah.
So within all of this, right, like the situation was so perfectly calculated for Joseph to be established as a martyred prophet. Let me just say, had civil war broken out, true actual civil war between the Mormons and the state of Illinois, I think Mormonism would be much less of a thing today.
Yeah.
Because all things considered, the Mormons may have been chased out of the state, but they got off scot-free.
Absolutely.
So in all of this, right, a lot of things could have been done differently that may have increased the long-term influence that Mormonism had on American and world history. Yeah. None of those steps were taken.
Right. And they came this close to getting exterminated.
Very much so. They did get chased out of Nauvoo, at least, right? Like the Battle of Nauvoo happened, and this is during the Schism Crisis, and that's what incited Brigham Young to take everybody out to Nebraska to winter quarters and begin their journey across the plains. So, like, there were things that happened that pushed the Mormons away from this location and caused the RLDS Church to eventually headquarter in Lamoni, Iowa.
Yeah, and all the other splinter groups as well. In fact, I just want to put a plug in for our next episode. The things that happened to the Mormon Church during the secession crisis blow my mind. It's one of my favorite.
Crazy. It's crazy
so
stuff.
Crazy. What's happened now that the head has been cut off? Who's going to take up the mantle now?
Yeah, that's next time around.
So Joseph Smith rises from the dead in a few days, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah, they bury him in the Nauvoo house and he moves a stone out of the way. Yeah, it's really cool. Emma finds him in his folded clothes.
Died in front of him. He comes out of the little well. Dude, this is unbelievably interesting. And there's so many little rabbit holes you can dig into, I can tell, in this discussion.
So many.
Yeah.
We resisted as best we could. Yeah.
Part of me, like, I can't wait to find, and you think like the death of Joseph Smith is going to be like it, and you're like, oh, I finally got my orgasm, climaxed, and then you find out you're like, what is Nauvoo about to do? What is about to happen? Where's the other guys at? Where are these other prophets, or these people that become prophets, of course? Like, where are they at in the picture? What's going on? What happens to them? What is documented, how they react when they find out their prophet has died? Like, all of that good stuff. That's good. I mean, that's some good material. So are we going into that in the next episode?
Next episode.
Yeah, there's a few more threads to just pick up to round out this episode, right? Because like the state's on the precipice of civil war, right? And the supreme leader of the aggressive party was just murdered.
Oh my. All right, I'm backing out, finish the threads and
a gracious host today. Yeah, so in all of this, right, Governor Ford had just given his speech to the Mormons that don't interfere. If you interfere, it's going to be seen as aggression. You're going to be in defiance of the state. He had given them very stern warnings.
And we will burn you to the ground, to the last person.
Yeah. Your city will be burned to the ground. And he pitied the women and children that were caught up in this delusion as well, because they would suffer for this, right? Yeah. That's what had happened in Missouri to the Mormons.
Bingo, yeah.
They aggressively attacked the state. The state said, no, we're not having that. You're getting out of our state. Yeah. And a lot of people suffered and died for that, hundreds. And thousands suffered enormously for that.
Yeah, on both sides, incidentally.
On both sides, certainly. So in all of this, right, the state is still on the precipice of civil war. Joseph and Hyrum are dead. The owner of the hotel it's the Hamilton Hotel in Carthage. He is a citizen of Carthage, but he is not an anti-Mormon. He's somebody who would be seen probably as Jack Mormon, but Mormons are a lot of his patrons, so he has to keep everybody kind of happy.
Switzerland,
yeah, and there's so many details that happen around Hamilton's hotel here that we just didn't discuss because those are just other rabbit trails. You got to check out my Road to Carthage series to hear all of how all of that happened. But so this Hamilton, I can't remember his name. Anyway, Hamilton, I've lost it.
What you're
so Hamilton is the owner of Artois. I was going to say Arthur, but I knew that wasn't right. All right, Artois Hamilton.
Not weird and Victorian enough, yeah.
That's right. This guy was ahead of his time. So Artois Hamilton, he realizes the whole city is emptying. He's not sure what's going on, but he's going to guard his inn. He isn't sure when to expect Governor Ford back. He's not sure when to expect the other militia leaders. He doesn't know if Mormon militia is going to come in and burn his city to the ground. He doesn't know what's going on. But what he does see is Willard Richards carrying a nearly dead John Taylor to his hotel, away from where this mob was dispersing like cockroaches to hot light.
It's bad for the hospitality industry as a whole. You got to admit,
sorry. I mean, good job, Artois. Good job. So he brings in John Taylor and Willard Richards and starts immediately tending to John Taylor's wounds. Him and Dr. Richards work to get the bleeding stopped, to get Taylor to remain conscious.
If I remember correctly, Taylor resisted anybody else approaching him at first, and they sort of had to the women who attended to him and Hamilton had to no, you're fine, we're not here to kill you.
I don't remember reading that specifically, but it wouldn't surprise me. Yeah, certainly. But in all of this, right, John Taylor knows, Willard Richards knows that if the Mormons, when they hear this, the Nauvoo Legion is coming. And then everybody's life is on the line. So Willard Richards immediately establishes communication. And at this time as well, Joe's younger brother, Samuel Smith, rides into town, rides into Carthage to see what is going on. Maybe he caught intel or heard of somebody whispering of a conspiracy. Who knows? But Samuel Smith was traveling with somebody else from Nauvoo to Carthage, maybe to even just bring and to send and receive letters from the prisoners, right?
Right. And a fun fact about Samuel Smith at this time, he is probably the most likely candidate. He's not the prime heir, but he's the most likely candidate to become the new head of the church.
Right, because this is a patrilineal church.
But we'll get into that later. We can get into that later.
Yeah, well, it is important, though, because the only other remaining alive brother other than Samuel is William Smith, who was a divisive figure. I give a bunch of these figures nicknames on my podcast. I call him Crazy Willie because he and Joseph were getting in fights all the time and like knocking the hell out of each other. This guy owned brothels and bars and his own like editorial paper that he made. This guy actually attacked Thomas Sharp all the time by calling him Tom Ass Sharp in his own articles, right? Like he's just wily, he's unpredictable. Nobody really likes him that much, but everybody likes Samuel. Samuel is the next heir of the church, the next heir apparent. So Samuel comes riding into town and sees that the town is basically a ghost town now. He gets to the inn and he sees that John Taylor is laying there almost dead, bleeding out like crazy. And then he sees in the same room the bodies of his older brothers, Joseph and Hyrum. And it's at this time that Willard Richards pens a letter to the church and tells everybody, stand down.
Yeah. Stand
down. Don't do anything stupid. Let me see if I can find the exact language he used.
I have it if you don't mind.
You have it? Yeah, please. Yeah, please.
It's pretty sparse. It's Joseph and Hyrum are dead. Taylor wounded, not very badly. I am well. Our guard was forced, as we believe, by a band of Missourians from 1 to 200. The job was done in an instant, and the party fled towards Nauvoo instantly. This is as I believe it. The citizens here are afraid of the Mormons attacking them. I promise them no. W. Richards. Note, the citizens promise us protection. Alarm guns have been fired. John Taylor also signs it.
Yeah, and getting John Taylor to sign it as well is super important in this. Because if he says John Taylor is well, or John Taylor is injured, not badly, right. You're saying that if you got John Taylor's signature on that letter as well, that just helps people to realize, oh, so he's conscious, he's fine, he's okay, right? He's going to be fine.
He'll be crippled for the rest of his life, and he's in incredible pain.
Yeah, but he's fine. He's doing great now. Yeah. Right, so... that letter travels back to Nauvoo, I think with Samuel Smith.
Well, actually, it's kind of fascinating. It was handed to the coroner of the town, who gave it to his brothers, who were afraid to go to Nauvoo because they were afraid the Mormons would kill anybody who delivered that.
That's right. That's what it was. Yes,
so
that's right.
They took it to another guy who lived a few miles north of Carthage, who agreed to carry it with the help of other guy who knew the roads and could avoid any troops, be they Mormons or Mobocrats.
Yeah, that's what happened. Yeah. Samuel stayed. Yeah, Samuel stayed the night there in Carthage, prepared the bodies, and helps John Taylor, and they brought the bodies to Nauvoo the next day. Actually,
yeah, nothing simple ever happens in this story.
No. It's all complicated, right? So that letter goes out. The Mormons receive it, but Porter Rockwell had a bad feeling apparently, and he was riding out for Carthage that night, just a little bit. I believe it would have been about midnight. So, well after Thomas Ford had returned to Carthage. And Thomas Ford got back with his posse, got to Hamilton's hotel, saw the bodies, went and examined the jail itself. Thomas Ford knew what was going on as well, and he immediately puts out a call to bring in all of the people who participated in the mob for arrest. Yeah. He wants people to stand justice, or to have justice for what happened. Yeah. So he's keeping his head on straight this whole time, and he realizes that his state is about to go to war. Right. I don't envy his position in any of this interaction at all. And he's worried, obviously, that the troops are going to come in, that bad things are going to happen, and also that he's not safe because one of his insurance policies was that he was in Nauvoo and he knew that they wouldn't attack the prophet while he was in Nauvoo, because then the Mormons would kill him.
Yeah. And the fact they did it anyway is good argument that, they didn't give a rat's ass about Thomas Ford.
Clearly not. Obviously, they wanted him dead. So at this point, he says that I don't have the exact quote, but essentially that he realized that his duties were done there. Yeah. And that he needed to get back to Springfield and to put together a huge report that he would then eventually present to Congress. But he does spend a bit more time there in the Carthage area, in Quincy, in the nearby towns, just trying to coordinate what's going on, trying to disband all of the militias, trying to keep the Mormons from marching on to Warsaw and Carthage. And I attribute his speech in Nauvoo the day that this happened, as well as the letter that Willard and John Taylor sent to Nauvoo that night. I attribute those as the reason why the Mormons didn't go on a killing spree. And human nature would intuit that they would, but they didn't. They remained home. And the way that the Mormons learned about it was Porter Rockwell was headed to Carthage late that night. He had a bad feeling, or he caught intel, whatever the case was. He headed towards Carthage, and he gets about 3 miles outside of Nauvoo. And he runs into one of the messengers who tells him that Joseph and Hyrum are dead. John Taylor's presumed dead as well. And it's at that point that Porter Rockwell rides through Nauvoo at 2 a.m, yelling that they've killed the prophet. God damn them. They've slain Joseph and Hyrum. Wakes up the whole town. And
that's where we should draw into our curtain today. Because
that's Porter Rockwell's famous ride right there.
Yeah. Stay tuned for next week.
Great.
It's not over. It's just beginning.
I know I did a shameless plug at the beginning, but I think it's important that you can give a little more info on Naked Mormonism, if you don't mind, Bryce.
Yeah, I appreciate that. So I hope that if viewers have stuck around this long, right? Like you understand that there's a lot of material here. There's a lot more material that you're nodding to, like so much more.
So much more. Bryce, you are an encyclopedia. I make a joke about you need an Encyclopedia Mormonica in my book, or it would have been, a multi-volume set. You are that multi-volume set. You are.
I appreciate that. I really, really do. Well, and part of my fascination with all of this started just when I started learning about atheism, and I wanted to pick up a book on early Mormon history. And yours was one of the first books that I read about this topic that caused me to like, oh my God, this is interesting. What is this? This is crazy interesting. And that was not soon after that I picked up a copy of No Man Knows My History and the seminal works, and started this journey. So I have you to thank for a lot of this journey.
I am very touched and honored to hear that. I did not know that, and that really blows my mind.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
So this is obviously, there's so much more material, in what we've taken 22, 23 episodes to cover.
I took 8-part, 10-part series, maybe 12.
Yeah, no, we'll get 9 parts. It'll be done. We got this 9 parts. Yeah. It took me 224 episodes to go through this on my podcast, right? So like there's so much more, and almost all of my podcast episodes are longer than any of the broadcasts we've done here, because there's that much material, and you'd be surprised how interesting the material remains the more you get into it.
Yeah, and the beauty of it all is from the virtual totality of these are from Mormon sources. Almost every single one are from true blue believing Mormon sources. So it's and he has them all listed. If you have any questions, where are they getting this crazy talk from? It's not
check my show notes. Check the show notes. I show my work. Well, and all of that is to say that all of the material that I did with Naked Mormonism, I'm taking my thousands of pages of manuscript, because everything on the show is scripted, right? So I'm taking all of that research material, and I'm currently in the process of compiling it into a book. And during that time, if you sign up on my Patreon, patreon.com/nakedmormonism, it's free to join right now. I charge on a per episode basis, but because of this hiatus, because of the natural conclusion time of the death of Joseph Smith, and also because of COVID-19, I've gone on hiatus. I'm not taking anybody's money right now. So if you want to join up, you get not only the entire backlog, 200 plus episodes, but also a number of the exposés and books that we've referenced during this series. I've read them into a microphone along with commentary. So there's a ton of extra material. If you want to hear Mormonism Unveiled, the history of the saints, in these huge exposés that were seminal and foundational at the time that they were published, I read them all with my own audio commentary. So there's a ton of extra material there on the Patreon page. Or if you just want to chime in and listen to the regular feed, or I'd encourage you to check out my YouTube channel. I've uploaded what I called my Road to Carthage series, which are basically the last episodes of this whole timeline that just do a whole overview of early Mormon history and discuss stories from the entire 39 years of Joseph Smith's life, that basically contextualizes and sets the groundwork for why Carthage happened to Joseph Smith. So I'd encourage you, that's a great place to start. Check out my 10-part Road to Carthage series on the Naked Mormonism YouTube channel. Great place to begin this journey.
And I can't begin to second that enough. It's like, if you have any interest in early Mormon history, this man is your go-to. People say I'm a Mormon expert. I am not a Mormon expert, not even close. And I've learned more just from watching you, talking to you during this show, than I have during the whole 10 years I was working on my other Mormon book. So I cannot recommend him enough.
Yep. And likewise, pick up Dave's book, right? Like that Complete Heretic's Guide to Western Religion, book 1, The Mormons, right? When I read it, I had a very, very elementary understanding of Mormon history, and that was only the Joseph Smith era. That book covers all the way up to modernity, basically. And the way I approached you at a conference after this, I was like, I was hanging on by the edge of my fingernails with this book. You rip us through the history so fast, but it's an excellent overview of early Mormon history and a very broad overview of stuff, post Joseph Smith to modernity. It's a very fast paced, very accessible, very easy to understand. So, David's book is also an excellent place to start on this journey of learning Mormon history. And even if you're not Mormon or ex-Mormon yourself, there are some lessons in this for all of us. It teaches you about humanity.
It teaches you about 2020.
Yeah. So shit.
Yeah, there's a lot. And of course, we have to give a huge shout out to Derek Blankenagle. Derek Lambert, MythVision podcast. We're having such a blast, and we're not done.
It's true. He was kind enough to orchestrate this whole thing and give us his platform for so long. So yes, thank you so much, Derek.
Yeah, we've been having an absolute blast.
You guys don't need to thank me. The thanking is, dude, I got free education. I got a free front row seat to a Netflix show series right here on my own channel. I mean, come on. I gotta be thanking you. You really, you guys are seriously not only great people, but your serious journey is focused on the truth and wanting to know what the actual truth is. And that's why
everything.
Yeah, you guys are really trying to look, let's cut the BS. Okay. Let's look behind what's been presented about these facts, historically speaking. And I really do appreciate it, because I've learned more than I think I would have probably ever have learned about Mormonism from what you presented. And you have my interest piqued to want to go check out your podcast and actually watch these shows more in depth after this series. I'm so busy as it is, producing the content that, I never thought, let me go just listen to these podcasts, but I have time when I travel. I'm in the car, dude. $2, come on, man, that's nothing. So why not bump that up? Why not hook you up with a $10, for a show? Here's $10 for helping me out, Bryce. And you can ask questions on the Patreon. They can personally engage with you if they join your Patreon, as well as, of course, Dave, getting the book, something like that that's fast paced, that kind of like this show.
It's a fun ass book. In all honesty,
it's a great book.
Yeah. Yeah.
I just had to tack on like plugging that because, you know, I can't stand the naysayers that are like, I have to say, like, there's one thing about me, man. I get all these comments and all the positive ones are like, yes. But then there has to be that one comment. And you're like, dude,
seriously,
put yourself in our shoes and understand how can we convey this to you to ask for the audience's help so that we can continue in this endeavor to continue driving home this angle. Like, you want to listen to a Mormon apologist teach you this history? Sure, go ahead.
Hey, if you want to listen to Mormon apologists tell you this story, just go visit these locations that are staffed by missionaries and owned by the church, and they will tell you the believing narrative.
Yeah,
because that's all that Mormons are capable of telling and retelling. Because there's so many dark little corners of this history that they cannot tell you, that they themselves don't know. And I can tell you, anybody who has watched this series through from the first to what we are at now, you have already forgotten more Mormon history than almost any Mormon will ever know about their own religion, right? And that's just because you watched a YouTube series on this.
Yeah.
Wow. Guys, what can I say? Next week, man, this is just, I love this. And I thank you for your time and your efforts. And I want to back out because I got to let you guys talk. I just too often will stop. And it's accidental. It's accidental, but I really enjoyed the way I did it this time for you and Dave to really bounce off and allow for me to just listen, just like the viewer. And this was a really, really interesting show. The way they died, just awkward. I wonder what we don't know. You know, I wonder what we don't know. And so thank you for doing this. Let's do this again next week. And I hope anyone who's watching, go down in the description. All the links to help these gentlemen are there. We really, really, really appreciate every one of you guys who help. We don't tell you enough, and it's so difficult with everything we do, how much we appreciate and value your positivity, your criticisms, you know, the likes that you guys put on the videos, and reaching out to these guys personally to say, hey, thank you for what you guys do. Like, that stuff means so much. We can't put it into words. And we really want to thank you from the bottom of our hearts for everything that you do. And you guys can go and check these guys out, like I said, and make sure you guys like this video. Leave us a comment. Tell us what you think. We'll do a live Q&A type thing at the end. And there's still...
We have a ton of questions, right?
You and Dave are supposed to clash on this idea of the development of the Book of Mormon or something. Like, there's something that you guys are going to get to dispute in a fun, friendly way at some point, like your disagreements on certain ideas, and you guys get to stay tuned on that. The last thing I would say is, don't ever forget, we are MythVision.